One of the most interesting and captivating aspects of Jura's character is his passionate love for reading, his insatiable thirst for knowledge, and his endless search for identity. And in each case, he finds himself in the utmost extremities, matched only by Orochimaru in thirst for knowledge, Kakashi in love for reading, and Kabuto and Hidari in the endless search for identity. But if you ever stop to wonder why? Why does Jura love reading so much? Why is Jura so obsessed with acquiring knowledge? And how does this tie to his path to forming his identity? In today's video, I plan to dissect all of these questions, the narrative implications for Jura's character, and the potential direction the plot might take moving forward. If you find yourself enjoying this video as it progresses, be sure to leave a like to show your support. Let's start with Jura's books. When we first saw Jura's mini library in chapter 7, it was already clear that Jura had an obsession, and now our alien friend is sneaking into the village just to grab some books. Jura's got a flat out addiction. But why?
Seriously? You asked why?
There are two perspectives we can view this from. The first is quite simple. Books contain a lot of information in an easily accessible form. Jura can learn a lot about the world and humanity extremely quickly just by reading a lot of books. In other words, it's not really about the books, but rather the information. This was likely the spark that ignited Jura's interest in reading. However, transitioning to the second perspective, this very well may have also evolved into the core of Jura's identity as he nurtures his humanity. Regardless of why Jura first became interested in books, the fact is he genuinely loves to read, unlike the other Shinju, more so than any other character aside from Kakashi. This is part of Jura's identity now, a tether to his humanity, and a step away from the Ten Tails. It's tough to say how this will play out in the future, but just like how Meruem's Gunki games with Komugi were his tether to humanity and Hunter x Hunter, Jura's books may very well serve a similar role for Jura, whether he finishes his character arc as a human or as a Shinju. Holding that thought for a moment, let's return to the topic of information. Why does Jura specifically have such a strong obsession with acquiring knowledge, even amongst the other Shinju? While it's easy to overlook, Amado's minimal dialogue in chapter 14 gives us a good idea of the nature of Jura's evolution. Amado explains that the Ten Tails' intended purpose is to devour an otsutsuki, become a divine tree, and suck the planet dry of life to produce a chakra fruit. He then surmises that, now that they've acquired intelligence, since intellectual curiosity seeks experiences that lead to new emotions and knowledge, namely information, that's what he suspects they want. Now at face value, that's not telling you a whole lot, it's practically just recap, but I believe there's more to unpack than meets the eye. If you recall, when Amado first explained his information about the Ten Tails and Otsutsuki during the Kawaki arc, Amado said that chakra fruits are lumps of tremendous energy and genetic information. Notice the key word, information. Similarly, whether this is the real Ishiki or a secret Amado hologram, Ishiki told Code at the end of the Kawaki arc that the chakra fruit is a crystallization of a planet's life and shall contain everything, a record of all life that ever lived and died on this planet. In other words, it contains information about that planet. What is it that Amado believes Jura wants? Information. How do the Shinju instinctively try to acquire that information? By devouring their targets. Reading is Jura's human side trying to achieve his goal of acquiring information, while devouring targets is Jura's Ten Tails side trying to achieve that goal. In both cases, the goal is the same. The difference lies in the approach. Now Amado, having not met any of the Shinju individually, is just making a theory and applying it to the Shinju in general. However, while there are aspects of this theory that apply to the other Shinju, I believe it best fits Jura specifically, the direct incarnation of the Ten Tails itself, with no influence from another human aside from Code and whatever actually caused him to evolve in the first place. In the case of someone like Hidari, he also seeks information. Likewise, he's also torn in two directions, His human side seeks to ask questions, while his ten-tail side seeks to devour targets. However, the information that Hidari seeks is more personal to Sasuke himself, rather than to the world as a whole like Jura. What exactly are we? Who am I? Who is Sarada Uchiha? Sasuke has always been an introspective person, asking questions about himself, the world around him, and what his role in this ninja world should be. Why did Itachi leave me alive? What exactly am I? What path should I take moving forward? I am an Avenger. Sasuke questioned and reaffirmed his identity several times in part 1. What is a shinobi? What is a village? What is a Hokage? Sasuke asked himself these questions at the end of part 2. Why, Naruto? Why would you go so far from me? You say I'm your friend, but what does that mean to you? Throughout the entire Naruto story, Sasuke has always asked deeper questions about himself, the world around him, and the ones closest to him. That's just the kind of person he is. Conversely, someone like Momoshiki doesn't seem to ask these kind of questions, most likely because Bug himself was never very introspective like Sasuke. The only sort of introspective question Momoshiki ever asked was, why is it that when I watch your pitiful flailing, I feel so refreshed when speaking to Code? This demonstrates that while the other Shinju do seek information and must undergo the same struggle between humanity and Ten-Tails as Jura, their humanity is directly influenced by their human origin, whereas Jura has no such source, according to Boruto at least. In other words, Jura's humanity is entirely unique. That's not to say that Hidari can't and won't become his own person, like how Koji is unique from Jiraiya, but Hidari's humanity stems directly from Sasuke's humanity, whereas Jura's is entirely his own, seemingly at least. It is possible that Jura has humanity stemming from Code, Ishiki, or even Kawaki as some theories predict, but it seems as though the ten-tail side of Jura takes precedence over whatever other factors might be at play. Coming back to our comparison to Meruem from Hunter x Hunter, unlike some of the other Chimera ants like Welfin, who remember their past life as a human, Meruem had no such past life as a human. Rather, he was the culmination of all the life the Chimera Ant Queen devoured before giving birth to Meruem, the king of the Chimera Ants. He was a blank slate, just Meruem, his own unique existence with no direct carryover from another human. While the Shinju have many parallels to the royal guard of the Chimera Ants, in this regard, the other Shinju like Hidari, Masuri, Momoshiki, and Ryu are more similar to Chimera Ants like Welfin, Meleoron, and Ikalgo, who are based on a single human, rather than a culmination like Meruem and the royal guards. While Jura doesn't appear to be a culmination like Meruem and instead appears to be the opposite, having no human foundation aside from Code and whatever other factors led the Ten-Tails to evolve in the first place, the end result is essentially the same. Jura is a blank slate. He has no such past life as a human. He's just Jura, his own unique existence with no direct carryover from another human, just like Meruem. This helps explain some of Jura's weird decision making and apparent lack of true drive to devour his supposed targets compared to the other Shinju. Unlike the others, Jura has no underlying emotional attachment to these targets stemming from a human source. Without that emotional tether, Jura has no reason to care about his targets. They're no different from his books, a source of information. The emotional tethers to Jura's humanity are ones Jura must develop on his own, whereas Hidari's emotional tether stems from Sasuke's, and the same goes for the other Shinju. To put it simply, Sarada is the number one thing on Hidari's mind, while information is the number one thing on Jura's mind. That's the difference. That's why Jura's targets are so fickle compared to the others. Those targets are merely one of endless sources of information for Jura. He has no reason to harp on Himawari. His goal is to absorb all the knowledge he can. It doesn't matter what order he acquires it. Moreover, as I've mentioned in a previous video highlighting Jura, Hidari, and Kawaki's humanity, If Jura's instinct is to devour things, he seems to take every opportunity he can to surpass those instincts. In chapter 4, Jura directly stated that overflowing curiosity and thirst for knowledge are still surpassing our instinctual drive to devour you. Considering that the other Shinju ganged up on Boruto with a clear goal of devouring him, while Jura alone was the only one who didn't fight at all, this statement seems to only hold true for Jura and not necessarily for the other Shinju. Then after declaring his instinctual desire to devour Naruto in chapter 5, he proceeds to read like a bazillion books instead of looking for Naruto, even though he can very easily teleport right outside of the Leaf Village just like he does in chapter 8, only doing so because the particular answer he was looking for couldn't be found by those books, so he was forced to look for Naruto. But when he arrives in the village in chapter 8, he takes a detour to a random bookstore he finds, dilly-dallies with Kawaki, and dilly-dallies with Himawari and Team 10 after realizing that Himawari has a Ninetales' chakra that he was sensing, before finally trying to devour her. But then Himawari powers up with her new Biju mode, sparking Jura's interest again and leading him to strike another conversation with Himawari and Team 10, before Himawari relentlessly attacks Jura with all her might and inspires him to release just a little bit as he slams her into the ground. And even after that, instead of simply devouring Himawari, Jura decides to test his true power by beating her up even more. And after doing that, he proceeds to talk to Himawari again instead of simply devouring her. And despite noticing Boruto as he closed in on them, Jura made absolutely no attempt to stop him. He kept his hands in his pockets and remained completely still. All he did was look at Boruto. He quite literally let Boruto take Himawari away. Jura has been stated multiple times to be stronger than Boruto, so strong that the whole world apparently has absolutely no chance of defeating him if he ever truly gets angry. And even Momoshiki is fast enough to slam Boruto against the wall and force Boruto to use Flying Raiji to dodge some of his attacks. Surely Jura is fast enough to at least react to Boruto flying towards him. In fact, he did react, he just chose not to move. This indicates that it was Jura's decision to not stop Boruto, or at least to not try to stop him. Then after Boruto takes Himawari away, all of a sudden Jura completely loses interest in Himawari and focuses all of his attention on Boruto, who he finds interesting and amusing. Then after Momoshiki shows up and tells Jura about Boruto's accomplice, all of a sudden Jura completely shifts his attention to this accomplice instead of killing Boruto like he declared he would moments earlier. Then when he's back home and Coach shows up, Jura shifts his focus away from the accomplice in favor of letting Ko take care of it while he invades the Leaf Village library to steal more books. There is a clear pattern here. Jura can and will allow any interesting detail to take precedence over his mission. If he can acquire the information he seeks by any means that don't require him to devour a target, he will do so. But why? Humanity. Identity. It is Jura's humanity that keeps him from fully committing to his path. It is Jura's humanity that fights against his instincts. His instincts are that of a Tentails. They tell him to devour things, and Jura told himself and the others to follow that path, to first devour their targets, and eventually to devour the otsutsuki and evolve into their final form. But in order to do so, he must abandon his humanity. He must abandon his identity. Perhaps the instinctual goal of devouring the Shinju's targets is to crush their humanity, to crush their identity, or more poetically, to devour their identity, to set them on the path of no return, to be none other than the Tentails. But as a person, Jura can't accept that. His humanity doesn't want to devour. It doesn't want to be Tentails. It wants to be human. It wants identity. The duty they must enact as the Tentails, a mindless beast operating on instinct with no identity of its own, versus the humanity growing within them, their yearning for purpose, the desire for identity. Right now, Jura is experiencing that clash, the clash of humanity versus instinct. Jura revels in his humanity. He finds enjoyment in his curiosity, his power in this mysterious world, all while telling himself that what he ought to do is to devour things and fulfill his duty as a Ten-Tails. Without even realizing it, Jura has been fighting and surpassing his instincts from the very start. He's always been and will always be Jura, not the Ten-Tails, whether he ultimately chooses to be human or not. As such, Jura is a well-conceived contradiction, a paradox who's blind to his own hypocrisy. He may die a villain, he may die tragically, or he may find solace with his humanity. Jura's path remains open-ended for now. Now previously, I discussed emotional tethers. For Hidari, that tether is Sarada, stemming from Sasuke's humanity. For Meruem, that tether was playing Gungi with Komugi, something he developed on his own. But what about Jura? As I mentioned earlier, Jura's books could very well become his emotional tether to humanity, much like Meruem's Gungi games with Komugi. Given the Boruto manga's penchant for object symbolism like Naruto's jacket, Sasuke's headband, and Himawari's vase, the parallels to Meruem's character journey, and how much emphasis they placed on Jura's obsession with reading, going so far as to have Kashi and Koji tell Shikamaru to treat Jura as if he were the bookstore's #1 customer, and for Jura to waltz into a bookstore in the very next chapter. I see no reason why Jura's books can't become the emotional core of his humanity. Taking that a step further, I feel like this is probably going to come across as a meme, but as goofy as this might initially sound, given that Ishiki went out of his way to praise Jiraiya as a star of change who bore a mighty fate, Jiraiya was prophesied to travel the world writing books and ultimately save the world by writing his Tales of a Gutsy Ninja novel that Naruto swore to live by and ultimately used to restore Nagato's faith in humanity. Jura has a passionate love for reading, going as far as to invade the Leaf Village just to get some books at the bookstore. Kashi and Koji is a clone of Jiraiya who is spearheading the plan to defeat Jura, and he knows Jura loves to read and will go to the bookstore. I think it's entirely possible that in some form or another, one of Jiraiya's books will help save the world again. Now, I don't mean that Jura will read Jiraiya's novel and think, you know what, I don't want to be a bad guy anymore. I just want to settle down in the Leaf Village and run my own bookstore. But that book could ignite something in Jura's psyche. It could lead to an encounter with Kakashi who could then ignite something in Jura's psyche. It could become a cornerstone to the development of Jura's identity. Whatever it does, it likely won't directly save the world, but it could very well be the spark that indirectly leads to Jura choosing his humanity over his instincts as a Ten-Tails, or the hurdle that makes him falter on his path to destruction as a divine tree. They use this exact concept with Nagato, and Ishiki referenced Jiraiya's mighty fate as a star of change in the Kawaki arc, so they could definitely do something similar with Jura. In any case though, I think that's a pretty good breakdown of Jura's passionate love for reading, his obsession with acquiring knowledge, and his path to forming his identity based on the framework the story has laid out so far. Let me know what you think about this analysis. Why do you think Jura loves reading so much? Why do you think Jura is so obsessed with acquiring knowledge? How do you think these aspects of Jura's character tie to his path to forming his identity? And do you think any of Jiraiya's books will make an appearance at the Boruto manga, whether in a serious light with the Tales of a Gutsy Ninja novel, or a humorous light with the Makeout series? Let me know in the comments below. Watch this video here for more of my content, subscribe and like the video to help me against the YouTube algorithm, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.